Welcome back to the UTINNI Initiative, where we say UTINNI and take the initiative. We just had Galactics this weekend down in Las Vegas at the Venetian. I was not able to go. I did go last year and it was very fun, but I just couldn't get the funds to go this year. But I wanted to talk about all the news that was revealed so far, especially as it pertains to Twin Suns. So, I want to keep this relatively short. I'm not going to be going over specific cards so much as I am going to be going over general ideas. With one exception, they revealed a leader that is going to change Twin Suns probably for as long as it exists, because it is crazy. It shifts the dynamic of the entire game, and I do have to talk about it in this video. So, without further ado, let's get to all of the news first. The first thing I wanted to talk about is they announced a new timeline regarding how their sets were going to be released. They're going to be shifting the release window of the first two premiere sets to be sooner in the year. The other thing to note is that they did reveal the 3 set names. Those names are Legacy of Skywalker, System Overload, and Galaxy at War. I can speculate as to what those will be about. I'm assuming, for example, System Overload is related to droids. I would assume maybe more emphasis on some vehicles too. Maybe cybernetics. I could see that. And then Galaxy at War. It's hard to tell if this is going to be more sequel focused or prequel focused. I'm assuming it's one of the two. It could potentially be Old Republic, but I haven't really thought too much about it right now. It's so far in the future. In terms of Legacy of Skywalker, it has a relatively generic name, I guess, so I'm not sure what it would be, but it does have the word legacy in it, which means we might see like Mara Jade in there, for example. They also announced that Icons is going to be coming back for 2028. Now, 2027 Icons has not been released yet, so we haven't seen a lot of the cards there, but we have seen some of them. They seem to be pretty good. I'll be going over those as that set comes closer, but for right now, it's just good to know that this will be a reoccurring thing, sort of like a core set for Magic the Gathering. This is kind of like their version of it. And I did notice in this Icons set, they did have the Clone Trooper helmet, which probably means this will be a Clone Wars prequel era focused Icon set, which is pretty good because we have the original trilogy Icons focus set for the most part with the 2 leaders and, you know, Episode 4 Leia, Episode 4 Vader in that one. So it looks like they're going to have some different eras they cover as well. But the main thing I wanted to talk about are the Twin Suns precons that, starting with System Overload, will be released with every regular set. So System Overload will come with 2 precon Twin Suns decks, along with Galaxy at War, another 2 precon Twin Suns decks. This is different than the 4 decks they released earlier, just as its own little mini set. I'm assuming these decks are going to be similar to the ones released before, where it will be a lot of new cards, some reprints, always brand new leaders, probably in pairings and probably related to the set that we're talking about. So this is an interesting development. Is this good for Twin Suns? Yes and no. I come from Magic the Gathering's Commander format. I've been playing that for a very long time. And the game definitely changed once they start putting out Commander-specific product. It didn't necessarily change for the better, I would say. One of the fun things about early Commander was just trying to make all of these niche cards work in a format that they could actually perform well in, and it was sort of like a fun puzzle to solve. Being able to use these underplayed or not at all played cards and actually make them work in this format. The format was a bit slower, it was a bit more casual. Once they started releasing Commander-specific commanders and cards in these precon decks, that's when things started to get a little bit more try-hard, let's say. Things started moving a bit faster with the game. Cards were stronger, and these other cards that used to be standouts back in the days of early Commander were discarded for replacements that were just better because they were made specifically for the format. This unfortunately has some negative side effects of making deck building a little bit samey, because there'll be some key cards that if you're playing those colors, you may as well throw them in, and considering in Twin Suns you're usually playing 4 out of the 6 aspects, there's a decent chance that you're going to be sharing cards with people at the table. It also means that the game could definitely lean out of the casual format and get a little bit more competitive, which might mean that it might be harder for someone with a deck that isn't very tuned to be able to perform well at a table at their local game store. So those are the downsides. But what are the upsides of this? The upsides of this are that these kind of products bring in more players, because one of the hardest things to get people to do when it comes to getting introduced into a new game or a new format of a game they play is building the deck. And for that, these precons allow them to just get one, sleeve it up, and play. And currently in Twin Suns, you can do that with a precon deck and have a very good chance at winning. Power level isn't that of an issue right now. Who knows if it will be in the future, but for right now, you don't really need to have that powerful of a deck to have a good chance of winning the game. It's more about how you play. Now let's move on to the other news regarding Homeworlds, the new set coming up. There's a few things I wanted to talk about regarding that. The first thing is that they're really emphasizing traits on bases and traits on your units for more of a tribal or kindred style focused deck. And these types of decks are very, very popular in Commander. Players love them. They love playing, this is my elf deck, this is my goblin deck, this is my dragon deck. They love doing that. So having this be more of a push in Star Wars Unlimited means that it will also bring more players. They know they can play an Ewok deck or a Gungan deck. And speaking of Ewoks and Gungans, those are two of the subtypes that are going to be heavily supported in Homeworlds. Whether or not we get a good enough spread of these Gungans and Ewoks after Homeworlds has been released to make a entirely Gungan or Ewok focused deck, we have gotten some Gungans and Ewoks in the past, right? In some past sets, there is some other cards out there, but whether or not we have enough to make a full deck after Homeworlds, we'll have to see. But at the very least, we should be a lot closer, and more sets will continue to support that and make those types of decks be really enticing to other players. One of the other traits they confirm they're going to be having a bit of a sub-theme for is creatures. And they even are introducing a new type of creature token, which is a 3/3. They're even going to be having different arts for these creature tokens as well, so it's not always going to be the same thing. All of these sub-themes, Ewok, Gungan creatures, and maybe more, we don't know all of them, will be tied to planets. So the traits on your bases are going to matter. Your Ewoks will have to be on Endor. So your base will want to be a base that has the Endor trait. That's cool that these traits now matter on bases, because they literally didn't matter before. So that is a nice touch. And I do think it kind of adds some extra flavor and charm to the game. Like the precon products, I do think these kindred-style decks, Ewoks, Gungans, creatures, and whatever else we have in store are definitely going to have players really want to try out Twin Suns because they want to play those decks. One of the other things that Homeworld is introducing is another new type of token called the Weakness Token. It is basically exactly the opposite as an Experience Token. Instead of giving +1/+1, it gives -1/-1. Is this going to be big in Twin Suns? We'll have to see. Because on its own, experience tokens aren't that big in Twin Suns in terms of like some of the cards out there. They're nice, but leaders that give experience tokens mean that they actually become more of a powerful effect. So we'll have to see if there are leaders that give out weakness tokens or if it's just, some cards here and there. If it's just cards, then they're not going to show up that often in a Twin Suns game, especially with only one set having this token. So we're probably not going to feel the effects in Twin Suns from this card if that's the case. But if there are leaders that can give out these weakness tokens, I could see that being something rather significant because it can really slow the game down and help late game decks. There's another card type they're introducing with Homeworlds, and what it is a keyword on an upgrade. So it is an upgrade card, but it has a new keyword, and this keyword allows it to attach to your base. Yes, we now have upgrades on bases. I will say I'm a little proud of myself here, because after Homeworlds was revealed at Galactics, I remember I was at my local game store talking to my buddies, and I said they're probably going to introduce upgrades on bases for Homeworlds, and I'm glad that turned out to be true, because I do think they're rather neat. So these upgrades have the Fortify keyword. They attach to a base, not a unit. Some of them seem to give you some reoccurring value, some of them some when played value, and some of them, they're almost like a trap. like you use them once and then they're gone, or some sort of one-time effect. These can be rather significant in Twin Suns. We'll have to see how much upgrade hate or maybe even fortification specific hate there will be in this next set, because in Twin Suns, it's a singleton format. So you have to be mindful of that when it comes to these types of upgrades. It's why I say upgrades are a little bit better in Twin Suns in some regard. Obviously, it draws more attention to the unit once it's upgraded, but a lot of times people don't have the answer to get rid of the upgrade right then and there because they're not playing 3 copies of this and 3 copies of that. It's an 80 card deck. And upgrade hate usually means that the unit's going to suffer, so a lot of times people aren't throwing in an Outer Rim Constable in their Twin Suns decks. But it might be worth it now, because these upgrades can be pretty good. Now, some of them with the one-time effects might be pivotal in a key moment, like on the last turn of the game, for example, but might not be worth blowing up depending on the game state. But some of them give reoccurring value. There's one in specific I'm not going to talk about now because there's not a good picture of it out there, but I saw it and I thought it was a really crazy card for Twin Suns, and I think that's an upgrade that will have to be removed, or else it will be too much for the table to handle unless they all team up on this one person to keep them in check. I do think upgrades allow for a interesting style of deck, especially on the ones that sort of have this one-time use, but even on the reoccurring value ones, where you can almost like use your early turns to set up some really powerful late game turn, like the game-winning turn, right? You have all these plays that are now potentially free from your base because you can utilize the effect or discard them to get an effect, and I think that's kind of interesting. So Homeworlds brings a lot of interesting changes to Twin Suns, fortifications being a big one, kindred-style decks being another, and the weakness tokens being potentially something that could be good in Twin Suns. We'll just have to see if it's on a leader and how that leader fares in the Twin Suns format. So now we come to the part of the video where I'm going to be talking about a card that I am potentially kind of scared of. This card can be format warping in Twin Suns. We'll have to see if the player base has what it takes to keep it in check, because it's going to require some teamwork. This is a card that people have been wondering where it's been this whole time, and now it's finally here, and I'm legitimately scared, especially for the format I love the most, which is Twin Suns. I'm not sure how big of a splash it'll make in Premiere. It's definitely interesting in Premiere, but it's very, very deadly in Twin Suns, and it is going to be a problem. That leader is, of course, Grand Moff Tarkin. And what does he do? He says, ignore the aspect penalties on upgrades with Fortify you play. Now, this can be potentially very scary because this ignores all aspects. You could play light side fortifications and any other colors as well. However, these types of effects are worse in Twin Suns because in Twin Suns, usually you have access to 4 of the 6 colors pretty easily. And you might be wondering, this doesn't look that scary. What are you talking about? Well, that's because the leader really isn't Grand Moff Tarkin. He's just on the bridge. On the bridge of the Death Star. And the Death Star is the scary part of this leader. This flip is terrifying. Now, it does have the same passive as Grand Moff Tarkin. You can still ignore the aspect penalty on upgrades with Fortify you play, so fortifications, essentially. It is a 212 capital ship vehicle, and the power really doesn't matter that much here. Really, it's that 12 health that you gotta worry about, because it says when the regroup phase starts, you may defeat a base with 10 or less remaining HP. The interesting thing about Twin Suns is the game ends at the end of the round when one player's base is defeated. This happens at the start of the regroup phase, which means this will go off and defeat a player, but no one will be able to take any actions, and then the game will end, and assuming that that defeat, plus the healing from that defeat, leads to the Death Star player having the win, they just win the game right there. This creates a bit of a dilemma, because if one player is in danger of being eliminated by the Death Star, and there's not enough healing to save them, it doesn't matter what their board state is necessarily, what their sentinels are, as long as the Death Star player can protect themselves and their Death Star, they can just win passively once the round ends. And that means you can flip late in the round and essentially catch people by surprise. So players will have to be very mindful of a Death Star flip. They'll have to be very careful about it. They'll have to be working together. They'll have to realize, hey, the Death Star's almost here. The Death Star could come anytime. We have to be ready for it. We have to make sure we can deal with it, or we have to make sure we take people out of range of it flipping. And it's important to note, it still does have a little bit of power, so it can attack potentially and get some players over that 10 threshold limit. If players aren't able to work together, this can be very, very powerful. It becomes even more of a problem when multiple people are playing the Death Star. Then you get in these weird situations where we're going to have to figure out how the order of things go, and we're going to have to deal with a lot of shenanigans. How do you fight against a leader like this? Well, the easiest thing probably is just to end the game sooner, right? This is a 9 deploy, which means that the leader generally isn't doing that much up until this point. They have a passive with fortifications. But if having access to all of those fortifications are good enough to possibly stabilize you into the late game and slow the game down, then that might be good enough. We'll just have to see. It depends a lot on which types of players are at the table, what decks they're piloting. But if the Death Star does flip, it has to be dealt with. You can't just let it sit out there. It's just too dangerous. Or you just have to have enough healing that you're not worried about it. This is a leader that kind of scares me. And the reason is maybe not what you think. It's not that I think the card is too powerful necessarily. I do think this is a very, very good Twin Suns leader. I think this is like top tier. But it does have some weaknesses to coming out so late. There's a bit of a reliance on fortifications. We won't know what those will look like because your Grand Moff Tarkin leader essentially just does stuff with fortifications, ignoring aspects, which isn't that big of a deal in Twin Suns. So you're kind of only working with half a leader until this thing deploys. Those are some weaknesses, but the strengths of this flip are insane. And so I think it's a great card, but I don't think it's broken or anything like that. What scares me though is that I think it requires players to really be smart about the Death Star player in the game. And I think we're still really early into Star Wars Unlimited. We're still really early into the Twin Suns format. There's a lot of players who do not play Twin Suns at all, and we aren't getting a ton of skill expression in this format generally. So essentially what I'm saying is the player base might not necessarily be skilled enough as a collective to deal with one of these at the table. And I think until we get to that point, this might be a monster in some games. And I'm not saying that to be mean to the Twin Suns player base. I'm mostly commenting that this is a very casual game where sometimes players will just kind of make decisions that are really, really bad for them and they don't realize it. They attack someone and take them to 2 before dying, and then someone else sneaks in the damage and they end up winning. And the other 2 players are like, oh my gosh, why'd you do that? Or there's players that are just kind of chaotic and they sometimes attack in a way that's very surprising and just like swings the balance of power dramatically. And so these types of things might be very good for the Death Star player because this requires coordination from the other 3 opponents. And if they don't have it, you're in a much better spot. And it might make people think that this card is better than what it is, even though it is still a very good card. The other thing is that this is a space level threat, and most people do not play space heavy decks in Twin Suns. Going space heavy is actually pretty popular in Premiere right now. We saw it at Galactics, a lot of space decks. There are a lot of space decks, but that's because they have to deal with an aggressive space meta. There's no real like ground or space meta in Twin Suns. Usually there's more ground units just because there's more named characters that are ground units, and if people are playing one copy of a card, they want to play the named cards. You know, they want to play their Ahsoka Tano, their Qui-Gon, their Luke Skywalker, right? They're not wanting to play TIE Fighter Squadron D. So yeah, we might not have as much power in space to deal with this when it flips, especially if the Death Star player does build their deck to make sure that the space arena is mostly clear when they flip. And if they have a bunch of sentinels on the ground and other ways to protect themselves and a lot of healing, I think this could be a very secure stronghold style deck where you're just building this fortification around yourself, this pillow fort essentially, and this is your win con. You know, you're waiting till someone makes the mistake and attacks a player and takes them 10 away, and then you flip in your pillow fort and you go, what are you going to do about it? And so this is where I think the card might be a bit rough to deal with. We'll have to see how the player base responds. And this is why I think this card is going to change Twin Suns basically forever. As long as the game exists, it's going to be a potential leader people will think about if they're wanting to do a late game style villain deck. This is going to be something that they're always going to consider. I also can't wait to see the showcase of this. I think this will be a really sick showcase with Tarkin on one side and a Death Star on the other. I think it's going to be very pretty. So it is very exciting to have the Death Star in here. We'll have to see if Homeworlds introduces some ways to deal with the Death Star and whether or not those are worth running in Twin Suns, because I think Twin Suns is going to be the format that this is going to terrorize. Maybe it'll show up in Premiere, I don't know, but I think Twin Suns is definitely where we're going to see this shine, and so that is why this card is on my radar for the upcoming future. Thank you for watching. That's all the news I have from Galactics. There was a lot that they shared. There's definitely other small things I didn't go over, or cards that I'm not specifically looking at right now. I just kind of wanted to talk about the big things that they showed. I'm also very excited for where this channel is going. I'm introducing a lot of different types of content, stuff I haven't even put out yet. There's definitely things I'm experimenting with, and the only thing that makes it rough is that I do work full-time, and it's hard to film and edit these videos and get them out in a timely manner. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. Make sure to yell UTINNI when you take the initiative, and I'll see you in the next video.